Hey, worship leaders, welcome back to the Spirit Truth Worship Podcast. Today I'm on with a guest, Justin Tweito. Did I say that right or am I way off?
Close. Tweito.
Tweito.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's a thing. Everybody says that.
Sweet. Yeah, I was about to say how often. I looked at it over and over. I'm just like, Tweito. I was like, man, I don't know how to do this, but I was going to just
Yeah.
go with boldness and mess up big,
Yes.
which is what I did.
No, it is not your fault. It is one of a kind, unique, derived from Norwegian, so I don't fault you for any of that.
Man, thank you so much. The graciousness, the kindness, the fruit of the Spirit all over your ministry already as we start this recording together. Well, why don't you just start by telling any listeners who might not know you, if they follow the playlist that I do, they may know you just because some of your songs are on the Spirit Truth Worship playlist that I curate on Spotify. But yeah, just tell a little bit about your ministry, how long you've been there, how you got there, and anything like that.
Yeah, I'm the worship pastor at a church called the Church at Nolensville. It's in Nolensville, Tennessee. We're a campus of a larger church family of Brentwood Baptist Church. So it's a little different. We have kind of a different name, and we have our own pastor and staff and stuff, but we're all kind of part of that family, and we're in the Middle Tennessee area. But I love it. We are essentially a church plant. About, I don't even remember how old we are, 4.5 years old or something like that, 4 years. Wow. I've been there going on 3 years. And maybe this is going on 4. I don't remember. But it's been great. Worship pastor there, and then being close to Nashville and stuff, I'm able to write with other people, and I also put out my own music and stuff like that. And then we'll do a lot of the songs at our campus and stuff. So, but yeah, I definitely feel like I'm a worship pastor first, and who happens to write songs and put them out as an artist as well. So,
man, that's awesome. Yeah, well, very cool. So kind of, would y'all consider yourselves like a multi-site church or the family of church? Like, how does that, how do you guys view that?
We are one church. We're technically one church with many, you hear that all the time, one church, many locations. We're not satellite in the sense that we don't stream a preacher in on a screen or anything. We have our own pastors and our own staff. Like all of our campuses are very contextualized to the areas that they're in. So we're spread all throughout the Nashville area, the Middle Tennessee area, and so it's a little I love the model. It gets complicated, but it's worth it because we contextualize to our people in our towns, and I'm loving it so much.
Yeah. That's awesome. I moved out of a multi-site church. We talked about this the last time we met, but yeah, so kind of did the multi-site thing and then have moved into a church planting network, which we would still say we're a family of churches, but in a much more autonomous way. And so once the churches kind of get off the ground within the first few years, they're totally self-sustaining, autonomous leadership, elders, budgets, all of those things, but super close connected. So we do a conference every year where we had about 20 churches come together last month to do this awesome college conference thing called the SALT Company National Conference. Cool. Super cool. But so some of the benefits of kind of the family of churches, a bunch of the worship leaders once a month we hop on, and there'll be anywhere between usually like 5 and 10 or 15 of our worship leaders get on a Zoom call, and we kind of talk ministry, talk shop, encourage one another, pray for one another. So yeah, there's a real benefit to that model of having like a family, but still having some like local autonomous leadership. And I think that's one thing that intrigued me is that, I'm serving at a church plant that's about 8 years old. Your church is about 4 years old. When you guys started, like our network, they usually start like meeting mobile, but because of the nature of your network, were you able to start with a building, or did y'all still kind of do the mobile setup stuff? Or
so we definitely had it way differently than a lot of plants. We are in our own building now, but we started kind of on at the original campus of our church. We started there, kind of the launch team, if you will, met there for a little while. Then they launched out into a temporary space where we set up a stage and we did all that stuff. It was actually a sports arena, so there was a soccer field right next to us, and we put up pipe and drape and built our own stage. And it was actually a really sweet time of early mornings setting up a stage it was literally nothing in this room, and then within an hour we had everything ready for a church service, which was crazy. I'm sure many people are used to that. We only had to do that for a year though. A lot of people do
Yeah.
that for 5-10 years. We only had to do it for a year because of the way that our church is structured, and so we actually have a building now, because we're a campus but a plant at the same time, and so really fortunate to have our building, and it's a great tool. But I really do miss I don't miss the early mornings, but I do miss the some of the like the ragtag feel of
Yeah.
not having a really nice building.
Yeah. Yeah. It does something in you where it's like the building carries some of the load of like discipling your people to really think on mission. Like, hey, this
Yep.
isn't, it's not all about what we do in this room. It's about what happens when we leave. And so you
Yep.
lose that a little bit when you get into a building. You have to kind of overcome that with, I think, really casting vision and culture and those kind of things. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, those are the conversations we're having at our church right now, because we're in a pretty large, like, established building that another church gave us. Like, we like swapped buildings because they were kind of declining and we were growing. And this was before I got there, but kind of you talk to people and they're like, man, I remember when we were setting the stage up every week, meeting in like a school, and then we were in a warehouse, and then
Yep.
now we have this like really nice building, and you really got to lead different through that to keep kind of the same grit of ministry and discipleship and evangelism that you maybe had earlier in the church plant. But
Definitely.
that's cool. Yeah, I love hearing that, some of the similarities of just the context that we lead. For anybody listening, I think especially they're like, man, outside Nashville, worship leader, songwriter, he must serve at a church of 10,000 people. What's how big's your church?
So our campus, our church is our room seats, fire code seats 500. We probably only have 450 chairs in there.
Cool.
Otherwise, it's just very, very tight. But we have 800, 900 adults right now. All in with kids and everything, we'll have right at 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 on campus every week.
Cool.
But it's still with that size room, it doesn't feel massive. It feels big, but it doesn't feel huge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, well, very cool. I just love hearing about different people in the context. Praise God too for what He's doing through y'all's church, that within just over 4 years that you guys would have grown to that size. I'm sure you've seen a lot of life change and transformation, and so that's cool. What would you say? We're going to kind of shift into the topic today, which is kind of talking a little bit more about practical tips and maybe some of the vision behind some of these things, but how to lead a team well, develop a team culture, and so. How would you say you've seen that maybe shift before we get into the practicals of what you do now? But 3 years ago, I would assume that maybe the team was less established, you had less of these things in place. What was it like coming into that team? And then maybe what brought you from there to where you're at now? We can get to some of the more practical details of your leadership.
Yeah, we so for context, when I came on, we were just getting started, or we were just planning, right? And we maybe had 5-6 people in the church that were kind of consistently on the team. Now, obviously, being a part of a bigger church family, we had guest leaders come in and lead and stuff like that, and so they were never without anybody to lead. But as far as just volunteers and stuff, it's probably 5 people, maybe 5 people in our congregation. Wow. When I send out emails now, I think I was looking at the roster this week. I think I counted almost 50, so it's like 40 people.
Wow. Or what has it been like to maybe lead the team through that growth and change?
Some of it's been stumbling through it. I have felt the need, couple things, like I've felt the need for process with that. So when I came on, there was no, hey, here's the process of trying out or auditioning or getting on the worship team, joining the worship team. It was, it started out with people just, hey, we need people to play. So I was calling friends, calling people to come in, and there wasn't much audition. There wasn't much me meeting people. People already knew. But as the church grows and people just by osmosis, we didn't have some big campaign that was like, join the worship team, we need people. It just happened. And people came up and said, hey, I'd love to sing. I want to do this, want to do that. And over time, happens. I think at the beginning, it's easy to get coffee with everybody. It's easy to meet one-on-one or, a few people with each other, to kind of meet people first. And then as you keep growing, it's like it gets a little bit unattainable to have an hour meeting with every single person that wants to join the worship team. So we've gone from no process to like kind of just all being on me to now we have a process of there's an interest form. There's an actual form you fill out, right? That gives you data, that gives you some story points of like, tell me when you became a Christian, and then they type a paragraph. So you get those key data points before you even meet them in person. So if someone says, I want to join the team, I send them the form, they fill it out, I get the responses, I've got it right there. And as far as auditioning musically, like I've found, hey, send me a video. And within 1 second of the video, you know if the person is like where they are, right? If they're completely ready to jump in, if they need a little bit more work or practice, or if they're just not right for the team at all. Like, you know, within 5 seconds of that video, no matter what the video is. And so it saves a lot of scheduling time. Like, hey, we're going to schedule a big audition day, or we're going to schedule an audition just for you as a person. Like, I'm going to take an hour or 2 hours out of my week to just speak to you. It's like, no, there's a form. There is video audition. But usually I like, before I even talk about music, I get to know the person. So the form does that. It also, I mean, realistically, there's an element to being on the worship team. It's not just about musical skill. And it's not even just about being a Christian. It's also about a lifestyle that they live of. Do they live a lifestyle outside of the church that's not going to hinder somebody's worship when they come in and go, I saw what you were doing last night, kind of thing. Or I know that like what your home life is like, and you probably shouldn't be up there, kind of thing. Not that you have to be perfect, but you know, that we want to be represent Christ when we're up there. So all that being said, the form weeds out a lot of that. So if someone's not saved, you're going to know by what that form they filled out. If I even put like, you know, marriage status on there, married or single. And it's like, and I put like, tell me about your kids if you have any. So you kind of get hints about their personal life and who they are. And maybe some of the areas that they might need leadership in, or maybe the areas they aren't ready for. Just by a form, whereas that would be an awkward conversation. But because it's a form, it is beautiful. But I always meet with the person or talk with the person, get to know their story, get to know who they are, why they want to join the worship team. Do you want to be a star, or do you love serving? You know, that kind of thing. Before I even talk about music or anything. And then the music part, that's easy. It's either hey, this isn't for you. Hey, we've got a choir, come sing in the choir. Everybody can sing in the choir, regardless of how ready you are to lead a song, right? Or hey, we've got these different avenues of serving. Go lead with the kids worship, go lead student worship, or like, hey, jump in Sunday morning and you're like, you know, you're ready to go. So you kind of have to take it case by case, but having a little bit of a process is like only helpful and keeps you from getting burned too. Because when you tell somebody you can't serve and they've only talked to you as a person, as a worship leader, then there's a personal thing there of like, well, they just don't like me. But when you say, hey, you filled out the form and, you know, you check the thing on the bottom. I even have a thing on the bottom that says, not everybody's right for the worship team, you know, based on, it could be skill, it could be a season of life, whatever. If you check this box, you agree that not everybody's right for the worship team. And they check it, and it's like, now you have that institutional authority to say, hey, this isn't me saying you're not ready, or like me redirecting you. It's like the church, it's the team, it's the church, it's this idea of the worship ministry as a whole. So it protects you as a person. You can still have a good relationship with that person, even if they're not on the worship team. So anyway.
No, that's great. Yeah, we actually have the same thing. So we have an interest form, has a lot of the same questions, testimony stuff. That's kind of the get to know you, learn why you want to serve, your strengths, weaknesses, like a whole form of things like that. And at the end,
we've even called it, because I had it called application, and then somebody was like, one of the like key leaders in our ministry was like, hey, maybe we should call it an interest form. And I was like, you know what, that's a really good idea, because it's like not an application. It's I mean, it sort of is, but it's like, you're just telling me you're interested. Like, it takes away this us and them mentality and the pressure, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, we do the same thing with the video too. We actually have people send in a video of them playing or singing. And for us, like if that video checks and we move them into the next kind of phase, we still have them audition.
Yep.
But it definitely helps like save like probably been hours saved of like people that you just know don't need to audition based on the video.
Yep.
And so that's been a super helpful thing
A
for
key
us
thing that
to.
you just said too is we. You said we send them the interest form, we send them the video. So
Yes.
even saying in your email, like even if it's just you and you're part time and there's nobody else, and it's like you as the worship leader or the worship pastor or whoever saying, "Hey, so glad you're interested in joining the worship team. Here's the process. We send you this. We do that." And so it takes away this like I'm the ministry. I'm the thing. It's we as a collective
Yes.
ministry do this, even
Yeah.
if it's you by yourself part time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you can
So,
always pull people like we do. I say we because we do have a team. And so
yeah,
we have 3 full-time staff members and 1 intern, as well as like one of our pastors serves on kind of the worship team. Like he sits in on those meetings too, and gives vision and direction alongside us. And then we have another, like our graphics person is also on that team and helps lead worship as well. But we also have like elders who are worship leaders. So like
yeah,
I'm not an elder at our church, but we do have elders who serve on the worship team. So like, who give, leadership to different, varying degrees. Like there's still like, as the worship leader, I still give the overarching like vision, culture, direction. But it is cool having like in other churches I've served at, I've always pulled in other people.
yep,
2 churches in a row, I just had like a woman who was like a really strong volunteer and leader, and she would sit in on every worship meeting, and she
yep,
wasn't paid. If I could, I would give them like a gift card to maybe like go meet with other women on the team, and it's like, hey, here's a gift card to Starbucks or whatever.
yeah,
But I found that really valuable in bringing in leadership, especially like strong female leadership, to kind of balance out what can, I think, be like a male driven,
yeah.
community of, we can kind of get in our own spaces where we
Well, and
forget that like half our team isn't just
and
like us.
because we're men and like I'm married and I don't like we even at our church like we're not we're not able to meet with women in the room by ourselves. Like there's just
Yeah.
really good principles with that. Same kind of thing like getting coffee with a woman. Like if that's the case, I don't want it to be well. It's just easier for me to talk to a guy because I'm a guy. So you don't want to end
Yeah.
up having all guy leadership and look up and be like, "Whoa, we're the women." Whoops, I
Yep.
totally neglected women. So that's really good. One of the things that I learned, we just started doing this last year, is I'm a staff of 1, and so worship staff of 1. So I'm the worship minister, and that's it. I don't have an admin. I don't have like that's the worship staff with 50 volunteers, and it's like that's too many people for one person to be
Yeah.
intimately involved with their life and lead them and grow and shepherd them and teach them musically, all that stuff. And so what we've done is last year we started the worship leadership team, WLT. So I have a group text and it's name it WLT. I have an email list, and it's me and 4 other people. So it's 2 guys, 2 girls, and myself. And we meet once a month for lunch after church on Sunday.
Nice. I love that.
And it's a 1-year term. They're going to serve for 1 year, and then they're going to pick their replacements to who they want to see developed more and be on this team. And so they're not like decision makers all the time, but they are servants, and they help me. Like one of the things we just did, I just sent out an email. I divvied up our whole worship team, and I gave like each person like 6 or 8 people. So like, hey, this month call these 8 people and see how they're doing. Like literally just see how they're doing and what they need help with. And because I can't call 50 people, I don't have time to call 50 people this month. So
Wow.
that's another thing and I think that's the wave of the future as churches continue to be smaller and more neighborhood centered. Like we're not going to have staffs of 50 people at a church. It's going to be 5 staff members for 1,000 person church. Like it's the money and the way that our culture is going. So it's got to be leader led. It's got to be led by people and the members, And so we've got to keep finding ways to develop leaders and develop our teams, even if you don't have a staff with you. Um,
Yeah, man, that's a good word, man. Like I really do think that's one of the key things that for a lot of worship leaders is like the ceiling for them, that they really like can't get their team to the size it needs to be healthy,
yep.
or they can't get their team uh, like bought in the culture where they want it to be, because they kind of hit this threshold where it's like, if you're the only one doing
Yeah.
everything, you either are going to limit the size of your team or limit the effectiveness of that team at that size. And so
Yep.
being able to empower volunteers and bringing other people in, I really think is clear. One thing I've been toying with this like idea for a while now is this thought of like, there's a certain size where you can just lead the people, like
Yep.
you as an individual can just lead the people individually. But then at some point you have to move from just leading the people to developing a culture. And then that culture influences leading the people. And so
Yep.
I do think like, I don't know what that number is. I think it's different for every leader, but
I think I've
yeah.
experienced it over the past 3 years. Like when we were a church of 200 people and there were 5, 10 worship volunteers, it was a lot of the same people every week. And you kind of get that community and stuff via osmosis by just seeing them once a week. But as the
Yes.
worship team gets bigger, let's say you have 10 people on stage and there's 40 people on your worship team. Well, that's people are serving once a month, right? And
Yep.
so do they really feel connected as part of the worship ministry if they're serving once a month?
Yeah.
Probably not. There's probably other touches you need, be
Yep.
a worship leadership team member reaching out to them, or a separate team night where you
Yep.
buy everybody pizza and just talk about worship and sing a few songs and you do whatever. But definitely, like it's the church within the church, and I think it's really underestimated what we have to do, not just worship, but all ministers, everybody that works at a church, because anybody that has volunteer teams, right? You have to do that. You have to lead the church at large, but you have to lead your inner circle of volunteers as well. And
Yep.
so you're constantly like spinning different plates. And with worship, it's especially interesting because you have I call them like there's 3 P's that we focus on as people, planning, and production, right? So really any volunteer space, but like with worship ministry, it's like you plan the services, right, with your pastor and the moments and the songs and speaking moments and all these things. So you're helping plan the service, you're helping produce the service. Like you want the production to be really good, and you want people to be served like at large, but also your worship team. And I think it's so easy, depending on how we're wired, to just drift towards one of those
Yep.
things. For me, I drift towards planning and production. Like it's just, I can do it all day long. It's not work to me. It's fun. Like it is. If I could just sit in a room and plan services and carry them out and not have to talk to people, boom, I'm good. Right. The people
Yep.
part is really hard. And so anyway, just finding ways to offload. It's like if you need to be the person in your church that is into the production, that's fine. Offload some of the people tasks. Offload even some of the planning tasks if you have to,
Yeah.
for the sake of like putting more attention to production. If you need to put more attention into the planning, and you can't worry about carrying it out with production, like find somebody that can step in and take the production. Hopefully you have a tech director or somebody that's doing that stuff. But
Yeah.
and then anyway, so those are kind of like, we need to be really like, we've got to thread the needle with the 3 Ps every week.
Yeah. That's good. I think some people may hear that and think, well, dude, we're just not big enough to have a tech director or someone to do that. But I don't think you're saying staff tech director. You're saying
Nope.
like you can actually raise up. So we have a tech director. That's not his title, because he has a lot of titles, because he has a lot of jobs, because we're an 8-year-old church plant. But he does all of our production tech stuff, and he runs sound. He trains all of our volunteers in tech. But he started as what we use the term super volunteer a lot to
Okay.
refer to people who are really sold out on the vision and culture of the church, who really want to be involved in church planning. So he joined the church because he loved the vision to reach people and plant new churches. And so he was a super volunteer. Now he's a full-time staff member, but he didn't start that way. And he served like every week for a long time, because he really cared. And we just sent a college student to Cincinnati who is doing that same role. So he was trained at our church, got saved his freshman year in college, got plugged into the team, spent, 2.5, 3 years being trained in tech, and is a killer sound guy. Well, we just planted a church in Cincinnati. He graduated in December. January moved to Cincinnati and is just a super volunteer, like helping lead tech, but knows how to EQ and run lines and troubleshoot. And we like are really intentional about even how we do that. Now that we're more established, we still like re-EQ every line every week. We start, even though we have a building that's set and like we could just like recall last week's EQs on the drums, we re-EQ every drum every week, one at a time. That's the first 15 minutes of a rehearsal, because we also are training people how to do that for when we send them out. So I think you can find those volunteers and don't wait till you're big and established. Like actually if you wait till you're big and established, you've missed it, because by the time you get there, you don't have the right people in place with the right skill set to actually lead at that level.
Yeah. And I would say, like you said, established, I find it hard to believe anybody could be established, truly established. Like if, let's just say you're really gifted and like you put together a great service and you put so much effort in as a worship leader, but if you don't raise up any leaders, what happens when you're gone? We call it the Mack truck principle. If you get hit tomorrow, you got hit by a Mack truck, who's there to take over your job? Would the ministry just crumble? And if it would, then you're probably not actually raising up people and leading people. You're just kind of doing everything yourself. And it's so, the funny thing is, like, the more part-time you are, the more bivocational you are, the easier it is to just do everything yourself, because it takes less time to just do it yourself than to train somebody.
Yeah. Totally.
So that's the great irony of it, is like the smaller churches that can't afford full-time employees and stuff, their staff members, like it kind of hinders their growth sometimes, because the staff doesn't have time to invest in people. They're just task managers. And so it's the great like juxtaposition of you actually can do less when you're full-time, because you can now spend your energy hopefully raising up more people to do the tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the earlier you can get out in front of that idea of training up, raising up, sending out. And we feel that a lot because we send out a lot of new churches. So we've planted 4 churches. And every time we plant churches, we lose staff members and people. And our network's planting 2 churches this summer that we're losing 3 staff members to. Like we're not even the church that's planting. It's like other network churches planting, but we're still losing 3 of our staff members. And we view that as a win. That's like a home run to us, that these new churches are starting and that we're a part of that. But we really feel that. It's like, man, every chance you get to raise up and encourage, build, invest in who's going to be leading next we think that's really important.
And I'll say too, like, it's exhausting. Like, I think everybody in their mind, when I was getting into this, like, we have in our mind, it's kind of the opposite of other careers that we think of. Like, we think, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to be at the same place for 30 years. It's going to be status quo. It's going to be, simple. I'm going to be working with the same people for 30 years and we're going to be best friends. And that's just not the way the church works, man. Like, if we're planning churches, like, we're constantly, not only do we have 52 services, we have a service every week. We are constantly moving. And as soon as one person is trained and you're like, great, I'm done, there's somebody else that comes along. And so we really need rest too, right? I mean, we need to make sure we're resting, and otherwise that's why so many people get burned out working at churches, because it's just nonstop.
Yeah. How often would you say to a worship leader listening to this, what's like a goal for you for how many Sundays a year you get off to like rest where you're not having to lead?
That is a good question. I'd say not being there at all, 2 to 4 a year, not leading on the platform and just being there and being a part of the congregation and just kind of helping lead other ways. We do 3 services, so depending on how many services you do, you probably need to take more breaks, right?
Yeah.
I'd probably be willing to say every 6 to 8 weeks, I'm just like, so just from leading, I can be there, but just from being up there and being in every single detail. So what I don't know what that works out to math wise, like every 8 weeks. It's once every 2 months, 6 times a year maybe.
Yeah.
That you're just like not doing anything. So anyway, and definitely just being away from the building. I find that when I'm away from the church, like I'm not gonna be there this Sunday, and like I'm dreading it. Like I'm like, I can be with my people, you know? That's a really healthy place to be. If you ever find yourself like not gonna be there, finally, you know, it's like you might need to reevaluate your heart.
Yeah, that's definitely a mark of unhealth rather than health. Yeah, no, that's great. What would you say as we kind of maybe start wrapping this up? Would be some like practicals on like thinking through like scheduling and like some of the just different aspects of like culture. It doesn't have to be scheduling, but as you think of like, man, what are the real big important practical takeaways for someone who's maybe trying to take themselves from that smaller team to really developing processes?
Yeah.
What would you say those processes are?
So a couple, let's talk about scheduling first, because I'm super passionate about that. I think I really like what we do, and it's not perfect, but it works really well for us. Scheduling, if you try to schedule too far out, no one knows what they're doing, right? It's like I'm talking about planning center requests, like sending out, just filling positions, right? I don't know what I'm doing 6 months from now. Don't ask me to be there. I don't know. No one's going to say yes to that. I found a sweet spot in, so like it is, it's March now. At the beginning of April, the first week of April, I will send out the May requests. So by the first week of April, we're 2 months out, and then we get to like 6 to 4 weeks out, and then we're 2 months out again. So at any given moment, we are 4 to 8 weeks out scheduled with team members, and people love it because they know what to expect. They're not going, are they ever going to schedule me again? They're like, oh, okay, he sent out the plans. I'm scheduled in 4 weeks. I can look forward to that and prepare for that. As far as actual songs, so that's scheduling people. As far as songs, we don't actually do a rehearsal during the week. We just show up Sunday. We got tracks and click, and so everybody shows up super prepared. I will send out Monday afternoon, at the latest Tuesday morning, what that Sunday is going to be. So as soon as Sunday's over, that Monday, I meet with Pastor again. We tighten up the plan, and usually it's 80% planned by then, but let's tighten it up. And as soon as I know keys are set, parts are set, songs are set, I send it out to the team so that they have a full week to practice and prepare. So that's worked really well for us.
That is almost exactly what we do for scheduling, actually. Almost to the T. We send it out on the 15th instead of the 1st.
Okay.
And we send out on the 15th of every month. We send out 15th of March. We send out the second Sunday of April through the first Sunday of May.
Okay.
So we're maybe just a week removed from that schedule, but so almost the exact same thing. And
that's so cool.
So that's great. I affirm that.
That's awesome. I've been at places that go week to week, and it's just hard. Exhausting. It's exhausting. Sometimes you have to do that.
Then it's Wednesday, and you're trying to find a fill-in for that night for rehearsal, and and
it happens. People drop out, but that way, when you have a plan and one person drops out, you're not freaking out.
Yeah.
Because instead of trying to find all the positions, you're only having to find a bass player or whatever. And,
and almost always people will know multiple weeks ahead, unless it's the last minute things. My experience has been there are so few truly last minute things that becomes a rarity. So for the person watching this who's like, man, I just don't think I can get that far out in advance. It only takes a few minutes to schedule that way if you use the Matrix tool and Planning Center. And honestly, after doing that now for a few years, I can't imagine going back. So if anybody's watching this and you're like, I don't know if it's really worth it. Cause
Yeah.
I've suggested this to people and them kind of pushed back. Like, no, I don't think it's worth it. I'd rather just do 1 week at a time. It's so like paradigm shifting helpful for you. Like my guess is if you're not doing that, you have a lot of holes to fill and you struggle to get your team scheduled. And this is the
Yeah.
solution. And
And I
so,
would say,
yeah,
even if you have the same 8 people all the time, every week, do it anyway. Like, that's even
yeah,
easier. Just do it anyway.
yeah,
Because it shows like the people that you're thinking through and you care. And, people sometimes knock planning as being anti-spiritual, but like, our God is the ultimate planner. He planned the whole universe. Like,
yeah,
so there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with planning. It's actually a
yeah,
really godly thing to do. So, and the
yeah.
other thing I'll say, like, as far as spiritually leading, this is something my pastor has really encouraged our staff to do. He gave us all a little moleskin, just like this big. And he said that he will write down, if he knows someone's going through something tough, he'll write down their name, what they're going through, and he'll just thumb through that every once in a while. And he'll remind them to pray for those people, and he'll remind them to reach out to those people. And so he gave us all one of those. So I was like, okay, I'll start doing it. And I kid you not, I started doing it that week, and then like people just started throwing up their problems to me. I wasn't even
Wow.
asking them. They just came to me, and I was like, wow, I have a system for this. Like, thank you, Lord. Like, and so every Monday now, the first thing I do on Monday mornings, I pray and I read, obviously outside of scripture time, but like I pray intentionally for people, and I pull that little moleskin out and I thumb through it every week, and that's the first thing I do every week. And I'm able to go, hey, how's your anxiety going? How's the new baby? I
Yeah,
know your car was totaled. How's it going? That kind of stuff.
yeah,
And that's been like super helpful. But again, some of those like things just take planning and practicality, and that's been really, really good. So, and
yeah.
that was all my pastor being like, hey, you should do this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the theme of all of this is that these are definitely helpful things to make your ministry run smoother. But at the end of the day, these are all things that will actually serve your volunteers better. And volunteers
Yeah,
love to serve when things are like smoother and more exciting, like more enjoyable to be a part of. No one likes like the last minute, oh, I need to change my plans tonight to come fill in because I didn't know I was scheduled. So all of these things are super helpful for just like making your volunteers love serving on your team more. And so I think that's super important it's really easy to think primarily about like how do we serve the ministry or serve the church, but we need to also remember that we're serving our volunteers. And like, yeah, how do we balance serving the church and serving our people, where there's like one of our contexts at our church now where we just don't have a lot of electric guitar players. And so we have a guy who loves to serve and would serve every week, but instead of scheduling him every week, I only schedule him 3 times a month. But I'm like, we go without once a month, we go without because it's better to go without than to burn out a volunteer.
yep,
And so just think about those even that way when you're thinking about scheduling. It's like, maybe you don't need to fill a hole. Like, you actually don't need a full drum set every week if you only have one drummer at your church. Like, you could actually do an acoustic set and that would be okay, because God doesn't need our full bands. He doesn't
yeah,
need a full band set to be honored and glorified and exalted. And so I just think that takes some of the pressure off too.
yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? And then I'll hit you with some rapid fire questions real fast.
I do have a disclosure. I would never have a Travis Cottrell poster ever. So this is Travis. I'm going to send this to you when it comes out. And if you guys don't know who Travis Cottrell is, look him up. He's amazing. I'm in his office. I needed a computer charger, so I jumped in his office. But I just disclosure, I would never put that up on my wall. So it's
Well,
not me.
you send that to him and then ask him if he would like to come on this podcast and put
I'm
me in
sure he would
contact
love
with
to
him.
come. Yeah, he would love that.
Sweet. Well, I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions. So
Yeah.
just answer them as quick as you can. Favorite social media?
How about least non-favorite Instagram?
Boom. Instagram. What's your Instagram handle for people if they want to follow you?
It's just my name, Justin Tweito, JustinTwito. Eito.
Sweet. Okay. You go to a coffee shop. What's your go-to order?
It used to be just straight up black coffee, probably Ethiopian. Pour over if I'm feeling expensive. Now it is just a chai latte with some sort of non-dairy milk, because I'm not drinking a lot of caffeine anymore. So I'll treat myself with. They're basically candy bars. Let's be honest, but they're delicious.
That is my go-to order at a coffee shop, and so we are
Yep.
similar. All right, favorite worship song to lead right now.
I love Izzy Worthy. I think it's amazing. But I've also know that some people don't like that song. It's just different. It's crazy. I actually had a lady in my church bake me a cake and say, "Please stop playing this song." And she baked me a cake. And
That's
so
amazing.
I was bribed. We did play it a lot, but I was bribed to stop playing it. And she doesn't like me because we keep playing. We're still playing it. So,
but you took the cake.
And I took the cake. It was chocolate peanut butter. Like, I'm not going to throw that in the trash, you know.
Amen.
But I love right now a song called "Worthy of It All," and it's like 12 years old or something. But CeCe Winans just put out a version last year, I think. And oh my gosh, like, it's one of those ones that you just start bawling. The chorus hits and you're just like, you lose it every time. Wow. So I love that song right now. It's really good.
Very cool. What is like one book or resource that you would recommend to a worship leader right now?
Oh goodness. Aside from the Bible, I say that. I will say it, that's a Jesus juke, but I will say it, like, if you don't know the Bible, you're not going to be able to lead people well. And if Scripture is not in your songs, maybe reevaluate your song set and your list of your hymn book or whatever, because it really is super important that we're singing Scripture and singing. Obviously, singing word for word Scripture can be really awful, but I think the Lord knows it too. He's like, yeah, don't sing that. That's a weird song. But singing songs that are paraphrased or come from truth, like scriptural truth, like that's what we need to sing. The Bible, that's a very obvious answer. But also, this is not a worship book, but it's a book called Heaven by Randy Alcorn.
Yeah,
and it can be a little weird. It's got some weird stuff in it, and I think he knows that. But it like completely changed my mindset about the entire gospel, about the entire Bible, about how I lead people with a longing for heaven. Anyway, so it's a great book. Check it out, Heaven by Randy Alcorn.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, Justin, thanks so much for coming on the channel. As we close, you already said your Instagram handle, but where else can people find you online if they want to follow your music? And I think you got a new song coming out soon. If you want to talk about that, just tell them what it's called.
Yeah, you can find me everywhere music is streamed. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all that stuff. YouTube, we've got live videos up there as well. And I've actually got a website. You can check that out. Yeah. And what was your other question?
You got a new song coming out.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've put out a few songs recently. It's like once a month recently. I did, recorded a project last summer and been working on songs from that. And so, the one coming out this Friday, I don't know when this podcast comes out, but May 18th or March 18th, is called King of Humility. And I've had 4 or 5 songs recently come out. So.
Sweet. Yeah, love it. Great songwriter, great worship leader. I've been encouraged to see your ministry from afar. And thank you so much for coming on the channel and being a part of this, having this conversation. And I think it's just good to talk about these things, be encouraged in the way the Lord's working at your church. And then hopefully anybody else watching this, it's like, man, these things aren't like crazy or super hard to do or really difficult. These are the simple, easy things that you can do to set culture and lead your volunteers well and lead ministries well. And so hopefully these things were helpful. And if you found this helpful, you could like this video, subscribe to the channel, all those things. If you're listening to this on your podcast, you could rate it in your favorite podcast player. But thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.